started?
Yeah, make sure everybody gets eats.
Get your beverage of choice.
Take as much as
Dave
you
is
want,
ready.
please.
Hang on just a second.
I was thinking.
We invited them to the back, so we're not.
These cups you can take home with you, by the way.
These souvenir cups.
Souvenir cups.
Oh, okay, that's what you. Good job.
That's our giveaway.
These are souvenir cups, so make sure you take them home with you.
That's what I was
Other people say, where did you get that?
Yeah.
It's a collector's item.
You can use it for
You have to eat it,
grandkids, right?
it's your cup.
perfect.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, give this the baby. Sister.
There's one more.
Come on.
I think so, I'm just gonna stand to the side.
That's
We're good.
okay, no. That's okay, no, we're good. No, we're good. I would like to, on behalf of the Friends of the History Center, say good morning, welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you for showing and sharing your time with us. We're proud to open another brand new exhibit for the 2025 season. And before we get started, there's some folks in the audience that need some recognition. And again, I would be remiss without, we have two of our founding members of the Friends of the History Center, Cam and Pam. They're both in attendance this morning. We're also extremely proud to welcome Cheryl Livingston from the Historical Society. Doreen Rodder from the Commission. She chairs that. And again, we want to thank everyone for spending your morning with the Friends of the History Center. To further explain our whole purpose and why we're doing the exhibit, none other than our not only newest board member for this year, but also in charge of exhibits, please welcome Doreen Rodder.
Thank you all. Thank you again for being here. First, I want to thank Maureen for really helping get this together, because without her, I truly would have been lost. Truly would have been lost. And then Amy, who's not here, but she, I don't know how she does it, because she's got every one of us in her ear at once. And she's very calm and somehow pulls it together. But anyway, this exhibit, I hope you do enjoy it, though. It's called Artifacts Keys to History. But really, this is Artifacts Keys to your history meaning Aransas County. What we did was we tried to pull out every artifact that had a clue, some kind of clue of Aransas County history, starting from the Karankawas, moving on down to Harvey, because we've got stuff from the new settlers that came, the first settlers, and then the first family going through the wars and what they went through. And then as once our opening person does her thing, Debbie does her thing, we've got a pause and toss. Fun stuff here. We've got, of course, what Harvey did, and then just a fun zone for the kids where they can dig and over here in a sandbox and get some pottery or bones or some type of fun little thing for them. But anyway, this is really a culmination of your Aransas County history. One other thing I'd like to say, in the back there is a card, a visitor experience card, that I would appreciate if you guys could fill out. We really would like to know what you would like to see, you know, and what you experienced here. If you don't fill it out, that's fine, but we do need your help, and we would appreciate that. So without further ado, I'll give it back to Ron.
Thank you so much. Before I make our introduction, there's one other thing that we would not go without everyone in the house recognizing is our current board. Dave has been so nice to be able to do all of our filming. Dave is the secretary to the board of directors. Eric is our vice president. Linda is our treasurer. So we got all the executive board is here. Our new members this year, and we really thank them for their time. Debbie, Doreen, and back again for how many times? Maureen. We got the Reens in the house, every one of them. But again, and as all of you know, she's Miss Curation. She takes care of everything in the other The other building is hers to make sure that we're, I don't know about that, but anyway, just so everyone knows that we really appreciate everyone on our board and the effort that they put forward each and every day to make this successful. Bear with me and this oak allergies, everything else, and we'll try to get through this. Our featured speaker to open the new exhibit is Debbie Griffith. Debbie moved to Rockport from Houston in 2018, following a career in human resources, environmental and safety, and being a nature and historian enthusiast became a Texas naturalist. I cannot ever get that word out without stumbling through it in 2019, and became active with the Coastal Bend Archaeological Logistics Team in doing Paleo-Indian artifacts dig near Victoria. She's passionate about preserving local natural resources and is on the board of the Aransas First Land Trust, the board of the History Center for Aransas County, where she regularly volunteers as a docent and helps with the exhibit content, and leads to the Aransas County Tree Committee that gets involved in a variety of events and initiatives for Rockport Fulton community. I'm going to stop right there just for a second, because coming up again, Pam, Debbie, we have Arbor Day coming up, we have all the different tree events coming up in the near future. Is that correct? And we're going to continue, is that going to continue to plant trees, things like that? We appreciate that, because when you go out into the garden, we have trees that have been dedicated, and that's something I want to make sure that everybody understands, because these ladies are a big part of this going forward. So we will again participate in that. And so just so everybody knows that when these events come up, we want to make sure that we do our fair share in Aransas County. With that in mind, this presentation is on shell middens.
Yeah.
Okay? Debbie will discuss and show the oysters, well, make sure
Oysters, whelks,
and
clams.
clams and other mollusks that in this area played a significant role in the history of the Texas coast or the Texas coastal bend as a food source, tools, jewelry of the Native Americans that inhabited the region for thousands of years. Yesterday, I got a personal upfront view of everything that she's doing, and I am fascinated. So please welcome Debbie Griffith.
I know pretty much all of you except Cam and Cheryl. Yeah. So thank you for coming and listening, and my good friends. To see me go through this, talk about it, store it, have it be a passion of mine. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, and try to work this thing. There. Okay, so I like to start out talking about this with imagining something. So imagine 500,000 years from now even. What will people find that will tell them about us and our cultures? What are they going to find that gives them a clue to who we were, what we valued, what we did? What are they going to find?
Cell phones.
Cell phone.
Lots of plastic.
Plastic.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, just think if you went out to a landfill right now, what's in there, okay? And what it tells them, they might be robots. I mean, we don't know what they'll be 500 to 1,000 years from now. But what does it tell them about us and what we value? So, what we leave behind tells people about our livelihood, community, resources, what was important. So they're going to find engine blocks. This is how long it takes to decompose. 500 years. Polyurethane cushions. And everything else in our society made of polyurethane. 1,000 years. Windshield. 1,000,000 years. And probably some of that comes from the fact, and they probably don't really know, but when you think about the artifacts that are found in Pompeii and Rome and all these places, and those were just a mere little time frame back. They're still exactly as they used to be, but windshields, million years, fishing line, the curse of Aransas County, 600 years, straws, aluminum foil, never, ink cartridges. So it's worse in landfills because it's not exposed to the elements, and so it doesn't decay near as fast as other things would if they were just out. And then over time, weather, sediments, probably not here, never know if it will be someday, but earthquakes, things, stuff like that start covering over and over and over and layering things. But anyway, so that's what we're leaving behind. So what did Native Americans, indigenous peoples, whatever you want to call them, what did they leave behind? And how do we know? So it really began, just a little bit about me. I moved here in 18, and going through Master Naturalist training, I met Pam. And she talked about archaeology, the coastal bend, and things of that nature, and it got me really interested. And I ended up joining Coastal Bend Archaeological Logistics team that does a dig and has been doing a dig outside of Victoria for about 22 years now. It's rich with paleo history. But anyway, I had been new to the area, found a bunch of shells along Coconut Bay and areas that were just weird looking and unusual, but they had similarities. And so there was an extended area with thousands of large, hard, chalky white lightning bugs. Not looking like the lightning bugs that we find. If you're lucky enough to find one, maybe with a little crab inhabiting something that big. And clams, scallops, snails, and oysters. And these all had a similar sign of breakage and usage, which I thought was very unusual. Because I had been in Pam's class, I started doing some research, and I asked some questions and such. And the other thing I noticed, though, is that the shoreline had a higher elevation. It wasn't just like walking out on the beach or walking onto a flat area of Coconut Bay. I noticed a higher elevation near coastal shrubs, small trees, and the undisturbed soil, which were very densely packed, was usually really dark, okay? And so these are some pictures of the areas that I had actually found and seen, and you could literally almost crush all these things. They were so dense. And what they ended up being is that they had fallen as the wave action was hitting the shoreline. They had fallen and continued to come out. So continuing that, I did research online, and because of cobalt, before I joined them, I went online and looked, and it was a little thing that Pam gave away during her talk. It was like a little bookmarker that talked about TexasBeyondHistory.net. And it covers, it's a fantastic resource. It covers all parts of Texas. And in this case, it was the coastal prairies and marshlands. And I realized that I had found a shell midden. And so really, just through continuing to do research, it was just amazing. And I found pictures, articles as well, from usually archaeological places or universities in Georgia and Florida and Mississippi that had pictures of the very same things I found. And so it was like, yes, there's something to this. And with my love of history and nature, I started digging deeper.
Debbie, is that the midden up there, the upper level?
That's a midden.
Yeah, the bottom part's just sand or whatever.
Yeah, and it could be that the further it gets eroded, that there's stuff in there. In fact, a lot of that's probably where midden was, and it's washed out. Same too. This one's on the other side of the bay. But so what is a shell midden? It's an archaeological feature, and it's domestic refuse used by, trash. It's their leftovers. Mostly densely packed, again, these mollusks. And it's our version of landfills, typically along the bays, marshlands, estuarial areas, elevated, etc. But you can see, you might have a giant area, and it's so densely packed. There's millions of them in there. And you can see right there, there's scallops, There's usually tons of oysters as well. Okay, so here's just some more pictures of shell middens. And some of these pictures are very similar when you get into Florida and Georgia as well. So you can see, like here's one, that one might not have been directly right on the coast, you know, on the shoreline, but they can be that deep and deeper, the far right photo. That one to the left of it there is an illustration that's in TexasBeyondHistory.net. It's an illustration that is used a lot when talking about the Karankawas and the prehistory of Aransas and other counties, kind of giving an example of what it's like. And it's kind of ironic that that picture reminds me of the one to the left of it where I have seen another shell midden, where I guess the clay that's in the ground kind of gets really compact and hard. So why are they significant? So they record a three-dimensional past for us. Geological and environmental conditions, so having to do with sea level changes, which plays a lot into it, creation of the bays and estuaries, settlement patterns of the Native Americans, where they went, what season did they migrate, were they foragers, hunter-gatherers, etc. And then the past natural habitats, you know, inland prairies, coastal prairies, bays, rivers, and estuaries. And some of these things can even still be found up on riverbanks further north. I guess I say north, west maybe, like Port Lavaca and Victoria and other areas. They will find them, and it's either from trading or, you know, they as they came down seasonally and they'd go back, let's say upriver, they would take certain things with them. So another reason they're significant is that there's a real distinctive correlation between our geology and the movement of the Native Americans. So the scientists and archaeologists have proven how this all worked together, which all helps to suggest the age of these things. And the other, it's a disappearing archaeological feature. So definitely bay margin, you know, erosion from wave action. Okay, so they're tumbling down, but also they're being covered up. You know, a lot of these might now be out under the water. They're way out there under the water, so they're covered by water. They might, well, just like here, you know, we have sections. If you've been to, what is that one? It's from the bridge. There's a big section of the Shell Creek, and then outside Fulton Irish Pub, they have a big section of Shell Creek. But it just gives you an example, though, that many areas probably have shell middens, but they've been concreted over, and no one has any idea what history is lost under there. So how old are they? I thought this was fascinating. It took quite a bit of research and reading to determine it. But really, it's dating back about 400 to 8,800 years ago, and that's supported by geology, environment, and other scientific studies. So carbon dating of organic material and human burials and where they're applicable, you know, that definitely aids in being able to date it. Looking at what they know about mollusks. I had to look that up. That's under zoology and malacology. I didn't know that. But the mollusks, you know, it tells you about the calcium carbonate and the structure of them and the aging, and they're hard. Okay, a lot of the shells are very hard. And then a study of ancient climates, climatologists. And so that, and with the geologists, geologists and geology, it really paints a picture, giving you a sense of how old they are. And in some of the materials, you can see how, depending on the stability of the oceans, you know, the oceans kind of rose and went down and rose again. So this area had a lot of instability for a long time because it was just, there was no barrier island. Okay, so we didn't have really as much of the bays and estuaries and marshlands. But once St. Joseph's Island was established, then there's evidence showing that the Native Americans would come from, say, upriver, where they had their camps, and seasonally come down to the coast and create their camps. And so it makes sense, even when you look at the geology, how here comes the barrier islands. Now there's these back bays and estuaries. They're lower, they're shallower. They contain, a lot of the fish and mollusks and oysters. And through time with that wave action, the rich nutrients up in the river valleys brought that down as well. They created the perfect environment for them. So this just gets back to St. Joseph's Island and when it was developed. There. So what does it tell us about the Native Americans? And because there was no written record, we don't know what they were called. We know from the written record, maybe as far back as, I don't know, what, Pam, 1600s, maybe? And what the Spanish and the French, their encounters, they viewed that they called themselves Karankawa. So these predate that. Do you have something to add? Pam?
No.
Okay. She's my role model mentor for a lot of this, because I soak up everything she says. So we'll call them Karankawa predecessors, and maybe others that were a little bit in that area. But we know because of the carbon dating and the structure of the mollusks and stuff, and when the barrier islands were established, that they go back at least that far away, and that it was, the coastal area was a food source and conditions were favorable, okay? We didn't have probably as many of the deer and bison and things of that nature that they would have upriver, but we certainly had a great food source. And then they maximized the coastal resources for their livelihood and sustenance, so not only food, but things that assisted them in their living. It assisted them in building their canoes, in using utensils, and really, because they, there wasn't metal, there wasn't any of those resources available. The other explorers had not come in and left behind spoons and things of that nature. And of course, this is so far back, they wouldn't have. But really, it gives us a glimpse into what they ate, how they spent their time, and what they valued. So what they eat?
So let me ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
I see tools made from shells, but there's bound to be flint as well, was there?
There wasn't
Not
abundance
here?
of flint
In
and
this
church
area?
in this area. In fact, areas that have it, even up to like where Victoria is, a lot of that came down from further northwest
Yeah.
and through the rivers,
Okay.
through the river flow. I've got some experts here, David's one of them too, to help weigh in and explain things. So anyway, and I will get to some of these examples here in just a minute. So what do they eat?
Fish,
Fish.
Oysters.
Oysters. Scallops. Turtles. Deer, rabbit. Smaller boned items. And how they spend their time. Besides eating and looking for sustenance, they made tools and utensils and items for everyday living that were hard, from the hard shells. So when you think about it, if they were upriver, they're not going to haul everything with them, okay, every time. They, go back seasonally, let's say. That's a lot of weight to carry. I'm sure they brought key items that were useful in making spear points and blades and a few things like that. But otherwise, in their wiki huts, they probably brought a lot of those because they were lighter weight, but they needed tools to make those things once they were down here. So I just want to point out just a couple items. I have another one that has lots of pictures. On the left is a whelk that's been used as a hammer, okay? And I took the one out of, I have some more at home, but the way that you can tell is through damage, okay? So you can see it's had impact marks and the damage to it. And they were so brilliant. And I'll show you a little bit more about it, but it's just ingenious. The one next to that is a shell. It's an oyster shell. And I'll explain a little bit more how they did it, but they said, we need something to weigh down our nets, okay? We need to fish out in the bay. It's a shallow bay for the most part, at least for quite a ways out. But this is kind of an example, a very crude example I made of how they weighed down their nets, because if you didn't weigh them down, then, it's gonna flow and the fish are gonna get out, just like they would today. So it's their own kind of seine nets, and they would attach them using those holes they made, which you can imagine how long it took to do that. But they didn't have cell phones and games and all sorts of things, and they spent a tremendous amount of time manufacturing these items, just like the dig that I participated in outside of Victoria. That area, they believe, was a huge manufacturing site, because a lot of what we found was broken pieces, like maybe it had gone into a bison and then broke off, and they'd go back and rework it. And so perhaps, a lot of that area was for manufacturing as well, because you gotta make it somehow. The middle picture is what's on a lot of the websites, and that shows them once again, see with their nets, and they're in the water, their nets are being weighed down. This piece right here, this round one, this is a top that they carved to, you can't match these up. But they were excellent at trimming. It's called a groove and snap method, and so they would maybe use something that they brought from upriver, or an item like this. It is rock, probably chert or flint, and just through repetition. In fact, one of the archaeologists with cobalt has on the website a picture, and he showed me how to do it, and you just continuously create a groove, and you even try to do it at a weaker point. These are pretty thick ones, but there's a place on the welt where it gets thicker a little bit. But they do that, and then they snap it. And from there, they can make a tremendous amount of tools. But this particular one, what do you think that would be used as?
A bowl.
Bowl?
Drinking cup.
Cup?
Yeah.
Yep. And then these pictures to the right is an example of, again, they use the welt, which I don't see many of, like crazy. So what was a welt? They grooved and snapped, they carved it,
Spoon, scoop.
spoon, ladle. And the thing is, you think, well, the wave just did that, the wave action. In the bay, there's not that much wave action, and it's not gonna have, and that's the reason I knew they were different, the consistency. There's hundreds and hundreds of pieces where it's that same curvature and carving.
Yeah.
This one might have been a good one for that cup to be on top of. But you'll see it, so they made everyday utensils, spoons, some other ones here. Okay, well, so a lot of them are multifunctional, okay, and again, the welt was significantly used. So we talked about a hammer, there's scrapers, they used a lot of clams. Not as much these thick ones, they're obviously a little harder, but you'll see, I think, what were they using this for? It's a right angle, or left angle, I have another one here, I have two of them, but, here it is. These weren't easy to do, and to do it with some amount of precision. See? They also used, they ate a lot of clams, okay, and a lot of scallops, but those aren't, the scallops don't have the same thickness to be able to really create a tool with it. You step on them and they're gonna break. Even the old ones will break. But these that are thicker, the whelk and the quahogs, that's what I say. There's probably another name for them. Another way to say it, quahogs, wahogs, something like that. But they used them as scrapers, okay? And the finer ones, like the Venus sunray, it normally goes around like that. It's a very pretty shell. They're refined, and so this can get scales off of fish. It can help remove hide and the yuck from a deer, because you're skinning it. This second one's got a little blue line about it. That is also from the well. And I don't know, this might be some, where am I? The black stuff. Asphalt, perhaps, because this won't come off. But it's a carved piece of the well. And now here, down here is a bit. It's smoothed in a very, very unnatural way. And so what they did is they would take maybe some kind of braiding stone, sandstone, and just smooth it, smooth it, smooth it, smooth it. And I have a few other examples of it as well. On the right,
But what would they use it for?
what?
That just one thing. It was smooth.
So, like for instance, this one's a good example. But let's say you have a branch, decent sized branch, and you want to trim it. Or you've got your canoe, and you've used the wood with it, and you're trying to shape it. The far right, underneath it to the left, is jewelry. Now, I've seen some pieces that I thought were jewelry, but sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a man-made pole and like from another mollusk, or the enzymes, I forget what it's called, I don't know if it's the radicula or whatever it is, but where they penetrate other shells, and they squirt an enzyme in there, and it kind of helps liquefy it, and then they suck out the meat. So sometimes it's hard to tell, but they make jewelry. There's been pieces like that found in burial sites and such, but just think, they probably like us too. They wanted jewelry, they wanted to have ceremonial, or, signify who has a higher position, have ceremonies and such, so they would take the shells, put holes in them, and then use that as jewelry. This piece over here, there's also some things that I kind of personally viewed as being knives because they were unnaturally shaped. I have one here that's it was a really good one. But again, using the whelk. See, some of these had oysters growing on them. But using the whelk, you can see this was the top piece of the whelk here. And so once they carved it, they could carve it here, here, there. And there's a couple pieces that I have that, I think it's still in the display. It has a smooth edge on one side, which is not the natural outer edge. And then there's another edge that's been chipped, and it's serrated like a knife. And so you find, again, here's commonality. And using other pieces, some really strong ones. This is the inner whorl of a large whelk that's been trimmed down and used. And then these other ones up here, again, they tended to call them adze, A-D-Z-E. Again, the inner whorl of the whelk, big whelk, that they carved, and see, here's even a little pattern of some of that carving that they did. But this one too has a bevel edge that's not, it's man-made, and same thing with other ones. So that can be used for many different things. A conch, like a horse conch, they had lots of these. I particularly like the horse conch because it looks like what does that look like to you?
Twizzle stick.
It's got the different type of rotation in it, but it looks like a screw. An auger, screw, whatever. Look at this. Find lots of these things.
That's a drill.
Yeah, so drills. Here's another one. That's not just a natural progression of, and when you think about about it, if they were inhabiting the area, even if just seasonally, for thousands of years, there's lots of them. And this one is one of my favorites. It's that second to the left on the bottom. Kind of meticulously how they took our inner world and they shaped it this way. I don't know what that's for. It looks like it could be done to make something decorative or, you know, but it's got a purpose. And again, it's part of the wealth. So here's just a few more. Some of these are pictures of what's on TexasBeyondHistory.net. Some are pictures of ones that I have found. And it's just, I think it's just remarkable. So a challenge is, this is what I was challenged with. Was it used for a purpose and it was worked, as they call it? Or was it just shaped by natural smoothing and breakage from tumbling and wave action? Okay, because I had someone challenge me with that. And part of the way you know is, was there a known history of an occupation or habitation there from archaeological records and such? And then does it have the expected characteristics, the right environment? The other might be because of the volume of these and the similarities between them. And so the answer to that is yes. There has been known occupations along Copano Bay and many of the bays in this area, especially maybe Guadalupe River, San Antonio River, where they kind of meet the bay. I know that many years ago, before my time for sure, there was an excavation. There's one on the called the Kent Crane site where they did an excavation, and there were some burials too that were found. But anyway, when I found these, I called the Texas Archaeological Research Lab, and to find out, you know, hey, what went on here, and they kind of described maybe in the general area, and I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, that's it's a site. I said, well, why didn't you put signage up? Because then people would go there and damage it and everything. And of course, the vast majority of what I had was before I really knew what I had. The other thing too I want to point out is that I have gotten with and have the paperwork to start submitting, because there's another site that was not researched, submitting that to the Texas Archaeological Society or the research lab and getting it identified as a site. That'll take a little while, but I have started that process. So in conclusion, the Native Americans, they were very resourceful, creative, resilient, and they adapted to the environment here along the coastal bend for food and tools essential to life. And so I just, what I really love too is the fact that when I found these, no other hands have touched these, perhaps for thousands of years until I did. And I think that's pretty cool to know that, or that's like even finding like an arrowhead, a spear point, which I have never found. But
You
that,
did? At my house?
yeah, from Saudi Arabia. That's another cool thing, or observation I had. We go to Marco Island a bit, and I've taken some boat trips out to some of the 10,000 islands, and you'll find large whelks that have been carved as well. And this last time that we went, they have a museum there. They have an entire section, almost as big as this house, on these very same shells. And their Indians, they were called Calusa, I think was a lot of them, but the very same things. And that is amazing to me. And just to me, that says that the human brain, whether you're in Saudi Arabia, because they have arrowhead points very similar to anakal points and things we have here, that the human brain will still invent and create things to sustain their life. And whether that's if you're on the Gulf Coast or you're in Marco Island and, you know, the tip of Florida, that the brain is creative enough that they are able to make use of the materials surrounding them to sustain life and give them what they need. So, do y'all have any questions?
So no Indians lived here? They were
Pam might know the answer to that. I think way back when, like way back, thousands of years, they probably did not live here because the conditions weren't right. There wasn't the bays and estuaries and grasslands and such. It wasn't primarily probably until St. Joe developed and then created permanent back bays and estuaries.
Protection.
Yeah. Cam?
What were the fishing nets made from?
I think that they were made from grasses.
Okay.
And just like if you used one of these tools, like I don't know if it's one of these, I took a branch that I had and I used the one that has the bit on the end and was able to get pieces of the branch
Okay.
that were pretty strong. And I thought I had one, actually this is part of the branch right here. Whoops. When I did it, this particular one, that's part of the branch, and that one's not, but this one is part of that fiber from the tree branch. Joe?
I just saw one thing you said that I thought was kind of interesting, that you had never seen a arrowhead, or never found an arrowhead at any of these sites. One of the things I had always heard about the Karankawa is that they were very adept at using longbows and very skilled at hunting.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting that you said you've never found an arrowhead.
I think they've all been
places.
ravaged,
You think?
all those areas. I ran into somebody once, and it was where some fresh water was coming into Copano. Anyway, I ran into someone who has collected many from around there, and they're probably all gone. And I don't know that they were particularly in the shell middens themselves. They might have been inland or along the coast, but I think that they've been, I did find once something like the bottom part of one. And I can't even really say
They
that.
also made, points out of bone as a resource.
That are just sharper pointed, they may not start as an arrowhead yet.
Yeah, I do want to show you some other things that gets back to that. So like that one thing I showed that I thought was maybe like a knife, it was very fine and a point. But the other thing, these were from smaller wells. I think they were used as drills.
Yeah.
Some, I mean, I've used one like as a toothpick. And they make, cute little things. I mean, this is almost decorative, but these are everywhere. Like Matagorda Bay near Indianola. They have a lot as well. But like here's another example of I think what might have been a sharper object. But they could use these to like get through deer hide,
Yeah.
things of that nature. And Bill Birmingham, who's one of the archaeologists from Cobalt, and online, they showed him, and when I was with them, he even showed me how to do that. He had a groove and a snap, but then you could take something like this, tie the cord, use it as a spindle, and that way they were able to also make marks in. Like I have a couple pieces that I think were decorated with lines. One, it almost looks like it's one of these, but with a top, and it almost looks like it was made to be a decorative kind of flower looking thing. So using sharp edges and stuff, and I do think I've run across several people that have a lot of points across from Copano Bay.
Has there, okay, this is my last question. Do you know if anybody's ever compiled a list of all the dig sites or different camps, or compiled a map, I should say, of all the camps around the area? Maybe they've not put up they don't want to put signs to attract people, but have they at least documented, made a complete map of
They're
where
known.
these?
Yeah, in fact, through my master naturalist training, that was an example of some of the things that Pam showed as well. Like in Victoria, they all have like like AC would be Aransas County, let's say, or Victoria is,
DC?
BC, 41 BC 101, or something like that, and so they are documented. I don't know that the general public has access to all those, and it's just a general thing. I mean, I think some of the areas I've found aren't, the documented things might be half a mile down the road. I don't know, because I can't,
Yeah.
believe me, I've looked, trying to find out, but in generality, yes, it's available. Pam can probably help you with that.
Yeah, or Dave, there's certainly a file but archaeological sites are privileged. You have to have a
Yeah.
password to get into it.
Right, yeah, the Texas Historical Commission has a geodatabase where they actually have all the sites that they know of and that have been actually recorded
Yeah.
through that process that you were talking about. And so they have these mapped, but yes, that's restricted, and that's for good reason,
Yeah.
because like you mentioned, people may go and harm them, then so the public may go and loot them. So that's one of the issues. So it's restricted to like mostly professional archaeologists. That's usually what it's meant for.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Debbie, let's say I'm walking around Murph Park and I'm in the water
Uh-huh.
by the shore and I find an arrowhead. Do I pick it up?
I think you're really not, I think you could pick it up, but I think you're not really supposed to take it with
Okay.
you. Yeah.
What about the same thing with your shells are okay to get?
I don't know, I mean, once I got these when I moved here in 18, okay? And I've always liked shells, I was living in Houston, and so I collect, and that's where I started finding pieces, okay? And I have decorated some, painted them, I painted oysters and stuff. In fact, I've got some over there, but I didn't know what I had. And so now I will go out there and walk around. I'm looking for shark eyes, or whatever they call those things, the round snails, just because I won't use them for art. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, because that's a park. I don't know. I think that if, I've read people say, you're not supposed to take a single shell off the beach. I don't know about that. If that's really true, and if it's monitored that closely, and if you should feel really bad for taking a shell off the beach. And a lot of what I have here is from pickings
All over.
month and a half, year and a half, 2 years,
Wow.
before I even knew what it was. And the same could be said for going out to the islands in Florida. Some of them I can tell are worked, some I'm not sure, but I see a lot of whelks, but they're old.
Well,
And maybe the experts here can tell us what the law really says and what you really should and shouldn't do. But I think that, when I've been out there, I can tell something is disturbing it. I don't know if it's, in some cases, I don't think that it could be a hog or something because it's high enough up. And I'll see areas that are really disturbed, and I have a feeling it's people looking for arrowheads and that they don't really know what they're.
Well, you never did though, right? If they're on the surface, but if you see something, you're not supposed to dig down in there, like down deep and see if there's something underneath it.
You can take
Yeah.
this one,
Right.
Dave.
Sure.
Who's gonna take that
So-
subject?
So as far as finding artifacts and picking them up, well, for one, be careful, because depending on where you are, especially some public property, it's
Right.
probably illegal, and you could actually get in trouble. You
Right.
get fined for that.
Right.
And just as a general rule, archaeologists discourage people from taking artifacts. You can take a picture, but since so many sites have already been damaged very heavily, we encourage people to try to leave things be. And what you can do is take a picture, maybe get a GPS point and talk to a professional archaeologist, because it could be something. It could be a new site. It could be something that we already know about.
Right.
But especially if it's very significant site, it could be something that we would be interested in recording, you know, and putting into that database that the THC has. And one of the things that could do is we could know about that for the future. Say if there's a construction project or something like that.
Right.
That way we'll know about it, and we could maybe take measures to protect it. But just to kind of wrap that up, we discourage people from taking things, and we would encourage people to tell professional archaeologists about it.
Right.
Do you have anything to add to that, Pam?
So, well, what I think is interesting, wouldn't we like to be able to interview these people?
Yes.
And really know what they were doing with these tools. And so there's a whole nother section of archaeology called experimental archaeology, and Debbie's been doing some of that. But, you know, how are you gonna learn unless you try to create the same kind of a tool, and then you've got it in comparison. But archaeologists are pretty good about hypothesizing.
And yeah, and Pam actually kind of alludes to it to a good point. You know, we absolutely understand that a lot of people are very interested in history, and they just want to, and you know, they want to be able to, you know, like pick things up and you know, touch them. That's one of the reasons why we became archaeologists, because we like that stuff too. But
Too late for me,
but we people that are interested in that in that stuff, you know, in finding artifacts in the field, we like to work with those people. We don't. It doesn't necessarily have to be an antagonistic, you know, a bad relationship, because you know, people you know that are interested in archaeology as a hobby. They know a lot of stuff, so we like to work with them. So that's another thing too. We want to have a good relationship with the public like that.
And so part of my redemption to myself is that after I learned what these were, okay, and I'm sure I picked up some more after then, you know, especially once I learned, but I never dug into the dirt. It's stuff that's just laying right there, and it depends on where the tide is, if it's in or out.
Well, you
But I am
could
trying
tell-
to educate too.
You couldn't tell this story without taking them out and bringing them to us and showing us what they are.
So that's how I redeem myself a little bit for it, and there is another site that is on the bay, similar to feature, not as tall, but I am part of an undivided interest to that property. And so I have actually gotten some of my larger whelks from that property, and that is not a known site. And that's the one that I'm getting with them and getting the paperwork about getting, you know, taking pictures, getting the GPS, and, you know, and having it documented.
So there are other ways to get involved in archaeology. I can't help but plug the Texas Archaeological Society. And many of you in the room already know that, but this summer we will be doing a field school. It'll be on Red Mountain, which is a Tonkawa sacred place near Hearne, Texas. And the Tonkawa have invited the Archaeological Society to come and help them survey this area. So if you're really interested in learning how to scientifically record, then there are vehicles, there are ways to do that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Debbie. I think this was really good. I know you're very sincere about your interest in it.
I am.
It's
And
been a lot of fun. Debbie and I tag team with the master naturalist. Have a really good time with that.
yeah, we
So,
do.
then-
And that's what got me
Yeah.
started as well, and I appreciate it all. And this was just, I was gonna hold these up, you know, it's like mirror images. But anyway, thank you for your interest. Thank you. And this was how they also were able to use them as hose, and they use the,
Husband persuader.
yeah, husband persuader. Same thing with whelks. There's whelks that have man-made holes in them where they were able to run a shaft through it, tie it on there, and use it as something as well. So you're welcome to come up and look at anything.
It's for the Spanish. For
Yeah.
Where's your tea party?
have like
Go get some sandwich.